Let's talk possible trade down scenarios for the Chicago Bears. The consensus, Greg Braggs, is it's going to be hard to trade down because after the first, 5, 6, 7 quote-unquote blue-chip players that are in this draft, everyone from 7 to 50 is all the same player. That's sort of the narrative out there. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. But that being said, teams do fall in love with certain players, and they're going to have their own cutoffs on their own draft board. So, as I always like to say, it only takes one team.
Absolutely.
And so I don't want to completely rule it out. I think it's unlikely, but I do think there are some possibilities here with teams that could trade back. Let's start or trade up with the Bears, where the Bears will be trading back. Let's start with the Indianapolis Colts because our guy Fran Duffy, all-city draft expert, analyst, all-around phenomenal person.
Yep.
He, in his 7-round mock, has the Bears moving back to 14 with the Indianapolis Colts coming up to draft Tyler Warren. What was your thoughts on that?
I'm not completely against it in the sense that if everyone is off the board on those first 9 picks, Tyler Warren is somewhat of a luxury pick for the Bears, depending on who you talk to. I know there's a lot of Bears fans that would like Tyler Warren on the Bears. But if you're able to add another pick, and then what did they get in return for that?
Shamar Stewart. Well, you're talking about the trade? Yeah, they added a 3rd-round pick in that trade.
3rd-round pick. You move back to 14, you add a 3rd-round pick. We won't mention who he decided. You said Shamar Stewart, but we'll just leave that out of the equation. 14 and 80, all due respect to Fran. We don't want Shamar. No, I'm kidding. But, yeah, if you can add another pick and move back 4 spots and still get the guy you're looking for, I see that as a pretty reasonable trade back.
I remember in the past when you mentioned the Seattle Seahawks potentially at 18 could come up. The Denver Broncos at 20 have been long rumored to want a running back. Sean Payton wants his running back. Now, the only scenario where I could see the Broncos coming up would be if Ashton Genty's still sitting there at 10.
Right.
Because I know that there's been smoke about Omarion Hampton, and I think as we're recording this today, actually Travion Henderson's in Denver visiting the Broncos. But this running back class, there's so many of them that I just find it hard to believe you're going to trade up for anybody that's not Ashton Genty.
Well, that's the big question, right? I mean, Bears fans have been talking about a trade back for so long now, but you have to have somebody there for teams to want to come up to. I don't know if Omarion Hampton is that guy. Now, Ashton Genty falling to 10, listening to Albert Breer's, little segment that he did today, he had Ashton Genty still on the board at 10. I find that to be a fascinating moment when we're at our draft party here in 8 days to potentially see that situation play out. And then that begs the question, not just the Broncos, but what other teams would be looking for a running back in that moment to come up and get Ashton Genty?
I would be stunned if Ashton Genty's sitting there at 10. I would be stunned if the Bears didn't draft him.
I agree. But if we're going to play out this exercise here on teams that would move up for him, the Broncos certainly are one of them.
Yep. Yeah, I think that that's again getting into the trickiness of trying to pull off a trade, because it's got to, we're trying to thread the needle between, there's got to be somebody still there that somebody wants to trade up for, which is why we've talked a lot about the quarterbacks. And that could be possible. I mean, we had Dane Brugler on Hogan Johns, and I asked him, how many quarterbacks do you think will be drafted in the top 9 ahead of the Bears, and how many do you think should?
Right.
And his answer was, I think there's going to be 1 drafted in the top 9, and I think there's 1 that should be drafted in the top 9. That kind of surprised me, because my answer to that question tends to be, I think there's actually technically I think there should be 0, but I can jive with Cam Ward a little bit. Beyond that, I don't think there should be more than 1. However, I tend to think there will be more than 1.
Right.
Because there's always some team that's like, no, I'm that desperate for a quarterback. I'm not even saying it's Shedeur Sanders. It might be Jackson Dart, for all we know. It just seems like there's going to be one team that does that.
Well, look at last year as the example. I mean, how many quarterbacks would you have had in the top 10 before the draft started, right? And then all of a sudden Michael Penix and Bo Nix and J.J. McCarthy find their way in the top 11?
12,
right?
I think. When
top 12?
With Bo,
with Bo as well. I mean, this is how these things play out. And if Jackson Dart is the guy at 9, you have Cam Ward going 1. Now all of a sudden Shedeur Sanders, and these quarterbacks are coming off the board. You're looking at the Colts, and you're looking at, some different teams, the Steelers. And as I've brought up before, the Dallas Cowboys. I know it sounds crazy. Cowboys fans will tell me I'm nuts. Well, that's true. But I do think that there's a possibility there that you'll have a few teams fighting over that last quarterback before it starts to get into the middle of the first round.
Well, you mentioned the Steelers. I mean, they're a team that needs a quarterback and a running back. Right now, the top of the running back depth chart for the Steelers is Jalen Warren, a guy who's never been a consistent starter. He's had a handful of starts. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, they could theoretically – they might be the most likely team to need to move up in this draft right now. They're in a really weird crossroads.
So, for me, the other wild card that I have that I wanted to throw out there to you guys is at number 31, the Kansas City Chiefs. I find them to be a little intriguing. No fans think that the Chiefs would ever trade up. That's just not what they do. They bring picks together. They're like the Patriots. They just compile picks every year and roll them over. They don't need to. They've got Patrick Mahomes. They just, fill out their roster and then let Patrick Mahomes fill it out. But at some point, they have to go back to getting some of the blue chip talent that got them to the start of their dynasty, right? And so at 31, do they consider moving up to get their left tackle of the future and protect? Look at how the Super Bowl played out against the Eagles. They got dominated against some blue chip talent on the other side. I mean, it looked like Alabama versus Colgate, right?
And they just lost Joe Thuney.
To the Chicago Bears. So I think there's a possibility there that the Chiefs might be interested. And, hey, if you're offering a future first-round pick, I know it would be at the back end. Typically, that's what it comes with it with the Chiefs. But at the same time, you might be able to add some pretty good draft equity there. And if everybody keeps telling me 10 to 59 is essentially the same level of prospect, well, heck, let's add some more first-round picks.
Well, you actually just brought up a really interesting team for this, because if the Chiefs do move up, they need an offensive tackle. They could use a defensive tackle. But the thing that we're not talking about that's so important in that offense, they could use a tight end. If Tyler Warren and or Colston Loveland is there, I mean, Travis Kelce's at the end of his career.
Right.
He signed his last deal. This is it.
Yeah.
I mean, Andy Reid's going to want that.
Then they've not been afraid to trade up when it comes to, I mean, they obviously did it for Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
And then they did it last year for Xavier Worthy. It was a smaller trade, but they did do it. Where are the Bills picking again? So I know it's just a
right
few
behind
spots.
them.
A few spots ahead of them.
No, it's at 30. So your Bills at 30, Chiefs at 31.
Right.
So, I mean.
Well, the reason I was just making a joke because the Bills keep trading.
Oh, yeah.
The Bills keep trading away good players that come back and haunt them in the playoffs.
Sure.
So maybe they should stop doing that.
Hey, why not? I mean, the Chiefs, for them to give up first-round picks isn't really much skin off their back, right? So that, to me, I thought was an interesting wild card team that might move way up. I mean, everybody's looking at some of the teams that are a little closer to 10. That'd be the furthest back team that I'm kind of got my eye on to see their movement.
I would also, I don't know how Bears fans would react to the idea of the Bears moving all the way back out of the first, but you don't want to forget about those teams like the New York Giants who maybe won't draft a quarterback number 3 overall because Abdul Carter's is too good. They got to take them. But if one of the quarterbacks they do kind of like keeps falling, that could be they trade back up into the first round to also grab their quarterback because they're so desperate. And that's the type of trade where you could get a lot back in return because you'd be falling all the way back then to your first. If you're the Bears, you wouldn't be picking until number 34.
Right. Hey.
But you'd have 34, 39, and 41 right there in the second, and you probably almost certainly be getting a first-round pick for next year. All right, that's going to do it for us on this CHGO Bears mini pod. Make sure you're following along with the podcast Monday through Friday, full-length shows throughout the week as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft.